all I've learned by listening to those customers is essentially how do you streamline and iron out some of the friction points. And if you see from a business standpoint, they're essentially revenue killers disguised as small hurdles. There is no way you can ignore or not be listening to those customer interactions, the voice of the customer.
How is it that you help yourself and your team keep focused on actionable insights and kind of maybe dismiss some of those data points that really end up becoming more noise than anything else?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about
Today on the podcast, we're talking to Rohit Vasudeva. Rohit is Senior Director of Partnerships and Customer Success with PocketPills, and he brings a wealth of experience in the healthcare industry, as well as a few others. We're going to talk to him about the importance of keeping things customer-centric. It's such a common theme that comes up again and again on the podcast, and he really makes some nice points that can be very helpful to you marketing leaders. But then we're going to talk to him a little bit about the challenges of working in healthcare. That industry has some unique perspectives that he has to constantly take into account, and we'll see how he's able to navigate those. And then we're going to talk about the importance of prioritizing projects and prioritizing work, and doing that in such a way that we don't lose sight of the longer term initiatives that we still want to make sure to hit down the road. We're happy to have Rohit and his experience today. Let's get started. Rohit, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We're very happy to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Shamir, for having me over. Looking forward to it.
Well, you have so much experience. I think it's really going to be really impactful for our listeners. You've done so much in your career, operations, customer service, managing P&L. And I wonder, as a kind of a way to kind of jump into our interview, as you've had all these various experiences working with a number of different teams, leading different teams, how has that really impacted the way that you now today think about digital customer service, the way you think about digital products and managing those in your current role?
I think I've been blessed to work along a multi-talented team, and that has helped me, build a very different and drive a digital transformation by providing huge value to the customers, enabling them to be more innovative, agile, and customer-centric. In my current role, I'm responsible for providing strategic long-term direction to the company's business, driving the next phase of growth. And I think my endeavor is always to help our users, our partners, the organization to help them scale by growing them, enabling them to envisage the big picture and infusing fresh energy, positive energy, and an attitude to it. So I think that kind of positively moves the leader.
Yeah, for sure. And it's nice that you say that, because that really kind of translates across any role that you're in, right? Those things are always going to have a positive influence. Now, we touched on the fact that you've worked in a number of different roles, but you've also had the chance to work in a number of different industries as well, all the way from healthcare to food delivery. As you think about those different industries, is there any kind of common thread that you've seen as you think about the customer experience that kind of translates across industry?
Yeah, that's a good question, Shamir. And the common word essentially is always providing an omni-channel experience, right? And there are other facets too, like how do you build everything for scale? While the industry may vary, the expectations are pretty much in order and one. All your customers want everything to be delivered on time, and making sure the quality of delivery, the quality of product or the services are just exemplary, right? So that's a common theme, and how you bring all of that together is an art. It's like an orchestra, right? So I think that's the key there.
Yeah, you mentioned like an orchestra or an art. I think we find that to be the case often. As you know, the podcast really talks a lot about digital customer service, digital customer experience, rather. And in particular, we really focus on the post-click experience. So we focus not so much on the advertising components of it, though those are important, but kind of what happens after the ad. What happens after someone clicks on the ad? What happens after they get that search result and they click through to the website? And as you well know, that part gets really complicated really fast because it is an orchestration, right? It's an orchestration of customer data. It's an orchestration of experience analytics, of user experience, of marketing messages, of technical infrastructure, right? All these things have to really be aligned in order to deliver an experience that's going to be impactful to the end customer. And I know you had actually kind of hands-on experience with doing this. What do you see as being a key component in kind of aligning and orchestrating all the components in a way that creates an experience that becomes truly scalable, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I think there are a few key components, and like you touched base, right? Scaling, if you think about it, scaling customer experiences like an orchestra, right? So there are different patterns that could also emerge when you listen across different industries, different processes, different teams, and creating a symphony, like we discussed, is an art, right? So customer experience, if you think about it, is a very complex ecosystem of, say, people, processes, touch points, and expectation that must be effectively orchestrated and managed, uh, especially with a deep understanding of what could be the strategic dependencies or ramifications, right? So, that being said, it's important to understand how do you bring that customer experience that you marketed, so to say, pre-click to life. And that purely depends upon what you want to accomplish as an organization or as a leader, right? For example, in food delivery, it's predicting hunger pangs with proactive notifications. At PocketPills, it's again ETAs, and that doesn't only build trust but also lead to a strong medication adherence, right? So, is there a pattern? Yes, but that pattern is always governed by having a data-driven approach, prioritization at every touch point, loop back with constant feedback, listening to our customers, patients, and then essentially seeing that how is the cross function alignment coming along, right? uh, are the tech ops surveys, are they all dancing together even if the music stops, right? So, and I've seen when this works well, it lifts the efficiencies, it reduces the churn across the board.
Do you find it impactful to take customer research, that customer feedback, the things they're telling you, and share that with those cross-functional teams so they're also getting insights, operations, IT, they're also getting insights into what the customers are thinking and feeling?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you about, let's say in my time at Pocket Pills and beyond, I think all I've learned by listening to those customers is essentially uh, the friction points, right? How do you streamline and iron out some of the friction points uh, that could just be purely allowances, right? And if you see from a business standpoint, they're essentially revenue killers disguised as small hurdles. So there is no way, that you can ignore or not be listening to those customer interactions, the voice of the customers. I think those are the most important elements for building something that ties up with the customer expectations.
It's interesting. We touched on the fact that there are these common threads that come across industry, and you mentioned what a couple of those were. One of the ones that I know I've come across, both in the work that I do with my clients, but also here on the podcast with the many people I've interviewed, it doesn't matter what the industry is. We've talked to wellness brands, we've talked to finance, now healthcare. It's always the import of not only keeping the customer at the center and making sure that it's data and information about them and their experience that's driving things forward, but also using that focus on the customer has a means by which to keep everyone at the table aligned as well, right? That's going to be the common denominator that gets the data engineering team and the IT team and the product team and um, the software engineering team, whoever else is at the table, to get them all to make sure that they're all working toward the same common goal, right? That brings that level of alignment. How important has it been to you in your career to make sure that you're building relationships with those teams so that you're able to communicate with them, you're able to bring them on board and kind of nurture those relationships to help impact the customer experience?
No, I think that cross collaboration is the key to making this magic work, right? And it's certainly pertinent for us to ensure that moving along with the teams is cohesive in nature and becomes a part of an organization DNA. Uh, and I think the journey could start by wherein you can start as an individual or a team or a leader by mapping the user experience, right? And it could be in different form, let's say NPS surveys, call replays, support tickets, CSAT scores, so on and so forth. But then the next step is how do you turn things around? And the approach that we take is we like to quantify everything. And I apply a simple prioritization matrix by saying, okay, what is that something that has huge or high impact and low effort? Because that wins get the green light right away across everybody on board, be it tech, ops, marketing, so on and so forth. And I'll give you an example. Let's say if they like to process the payment of a specific order, uh, helps get the member benefit from applying a discount card and lower down their copay, right? I think that eventually reduces the order cancellation, let's say by 15%, and it's a no-brainer, right? Even if there are tech bandwidth, limitations, I think I would want to prioritize this. Now, do we defer the rest across the tech? Absolutely not, but with a roadmap. And then we call those as tech debts and tie them to the OKR so that they're not forgotten, because those are important elements, like I said, essentially gauging through the voice of the customers and turning them into meaningful action through the insights that you get and feeding it back to the community, wherein that's what builds your top line.
You make such a critical point there. I want to make sure it's not lost on our listeners. And it's a point that's come up before as well on the podcast. It's the importance of saying, because you have that relationship with those other teams, because you're staying aligned with those other teams based on what the customer is telling you, the feedback they're giving you, you're able to not have to waste time kind of putting out internal fires. You're able to focus your energy on where things that are going to truly impact the customer experience and therefore impact the bottom line, and that's friction points. What are these aspects of this digital customer journey where the customers are experiencing problems and friction? How do you make sure that you're dealing with them, whether it's ones that you need to deal with immediately, whether it's ones you need to kind of roadmap out, as you mentioned, to make sure that you're still keeping track of that debt, but making a point to kind of pay off that debt in the future, right? You can keep yourself focused and keep your strategy moving forward because you've got the teams aligned and you're able to kind of keep the main thing as the main thing in the business. And I think that's super important for our listeners to understand.
Yeah, and that's not a choice when you're building for scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in my experience, just zooming in here, of scaling food tech business across 3 countries, launching in India and then expanding to South Africa and Philippines. And similarly, let's say in my healthcare experience with Tata 1mg or PocketPills, right? Starting small, moving fast, right? That vision requires essentially how do you structure your tech stack? How do you structure your operations team? And then create a synergy and a collaboration that allows you to get responsible growth, right? It's all about expanding without exploding, right? And in that, I've learned, some of the essential components that could help elevate and help you achieve that level of growth is having a rock solid database backbone, because there's a lot of touch points, a lot of information floating around in the ecosystem. How do you unify that customer view across channel, filter it with privacy, of course, baked in, wherein there's no guesswork, just simple, actionable insights that guide you to take the next decision, right? So some of these elements also include that could help is having a very agile team, right? Automation for sure, where it shines, like it's the world of AI, right? You can leverage AI to triage for support, but eventually it's always the humans, right, who will have the heart, because empathy can't be coded yet, right? And third is, as part of the ecosystem, is alliances. There is no way that you can scale solo as in an isolated role, right? You need to have a team, and thus PocketPills, partnering with prescribers, suppliers, logistic carriers, and making sure that you set all of these teams for success helps us amplify our reach. In the last few years, it has helped us amplify reach to say 30x without reinventing the wheels. So it's all about how do you structure and how do you set up playbooks for success.
Those are super helpful points. Thank you for sharing those very much. I wonder, we can dig in a little bit on that first one. You mentioned the importance of having a solid database. And in particular, I like the point that you mentioned that how important it is to have access to data from which you can glean actionable insights. And I like the fact that you emphasize that because I think that's something that gets lost a lot of times, especially in the world of marketing, where you can have a lot of information, a lot of reports, a lot of dashboards. Those things are super easy to come about. But when it comes to actually getting actionable insights, when it comes to getting information that you can take and say, okay, what is this telling me to do? Or what is this telling me to do next? What is this telling me to test or to try out? That's really where you're getting impactful because now you're getting the flywheel going, right? Now you're starting to iterate and make changes and adapt and expand and contract based on the changes that are happening in the market with the customer. How is it that you help yourself and your team keep focused on actionable insights and kind of maybe dismiss some of those data points that really end up becoming more noise than anything else?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about evaluating when you pick up or identify an observation, does that truly make an impact? And if it does, then what does it impact? Does it impact, let's say, the top line, if that's important, or does it impact the user experience? I'll be inclined to say, okay, I'll prioritize user experience, right? Everything else is a byproduct. So it's important to just ensure that you're zooming in and out and filtering noise. I was reading this article about Steve Jobs and very interesting. Steve Jobs, early stage when he was launching new features, new products, always emphasize that I don't like this. This is not how things work, right? But when people started about that behavior, while they were also upset that they were making proposals to Steve Jobs and were outrightly getting rejected in terms of the features and launches, uh, zooming into that behavior actually helps us understand that how he was effectively filtering signal to noise, right? Like 80% of focusing on the signal versus just filtering the noise under the 20% bucket. So as long as you have a razor sharp focus on what are the top 2 or 3 things that keep you awake all night, I think those are the ones that we should be focusing on. Everything else is purely noise that can take a back seat, and we can get to it later and put it in, let's say, any depth that you want to call it, a tech depth, operations deck, P10, P15, right? So focusing on the right things, the right time, I think it's the most important key. And sometimes, I've been there as well as a leader. You would want to achieve so much. You want to do 10 things together. But is that something that will move the needle? Is where we need to be careful and cognizant and move things along.
I wonder, you mentioned really focusing on those things that keep you up at night. I wonder, it's 2025, it's about to be 2026. When this episode drops, it may be 2026 as our listeners are listening to this. I'm wondering, what are the things right now as you think about digital customer experience, in particular right now in your space in the healthcare industry? What are those things that are keeping you up at night? What are those friction points those challenges that you're trying to make sure to meet and to get past?
Yeah, I think I can speak about my recent experience, healthcare in Canada, right? I think something that keeps me awake is how do you unify uh, and provide a seamless experience to users? Because there's a lot of friction in digital healthcare, right? There are barriers, challenges, there are regulatory requirements that kind of impede the smooth adoption, integration, and effective use of leveraging, say, digital channels across by patients, by clinicians, and overall as a broader healthcare ecosystem. And I think eventually, if you think about it, these frictions often lead to inefficiencies, increased cost, clinicians burnout, and then eventually it turns into, say, compromised patient care. And that's not good, right? So one thing that we've done well at PocketPills is we've smoothened these by providing an omni-channel view to our support team, to our prescribers, to our partners, And all of that combined together allows us to empower our patients through seamless and magical app or workflows, right? But is it solved industry-wide? Not yet. It's siloed. It works in its own silos, and that kind of leads to eroding trust, wasting a lot of time for everybody across the healthcare chain, right? And when I zoom in, why does this happen? I always stumble upon it's eventually the legacy systems, right, that are changing to life. Plus, there are turf wars between provincial compliances because each province behaves differently. So there is no unified healthcare wherein, let's say, the decisions are taken at the center, and it is a common experience for every user across the country. So I think that's the worry, something that keeps me awake all night. And I think what would it require is essentially bold collaboration, having, let's say, regulators, tech leaders. I wish we could do this and get every provider in one room and just focus on solving it through APIs, solving it through tech. It's like, imagine one simple health ID and you're unlocking your entire health journey or story for your lifetime seamlessly. I think we would save billions and lot of lives.
That's an awesome, really recommendation and really impactful for the way that the industry you would hope would be going and should be going in the future. But as you mentioned, just a multitude of challenges to get there. Just to dig into one of those challenges, you mentioned a number of proprietary systems, and that's one that we hear time and again. Again, it's across industry, dealing with especially legacy enterprise brands, legacy enterprise organizations, government organizations. You run into that so much where they have these proprietary systems that are often decades old, and they're just not built for the modern digital ecosystem. So now you come in with these kind of fancy MarTech tools, very powerful, customer data platforms and ESPs and a number of other tools, personalization platforms, and they all require data, right? And in order to do what they do and do well, they require data to stitch together, data to push and create segments, to trigger campaigns or to personalize experiences. But oftentimes, getting to that data can be such a problem because you don't necessarily have that data warehouse, that nice clean data warehouse or data lake that you were able to kind of build up on your own. You have proprietary systems that kind of are the system of record for those data points, and those proprietary systems do not have API connections. Do not have oftentimes even have a simple webhook. There's just it's very hard to get to that data because they were built before the age of the internet. I wonder, as you run into those challenges, how do you best navigate those things? And I'm not saying you have a solution because I know you, you don't have the magic bullet for that. But how have you tried to kind of work past those hurdles, even if it means maybe some duct tape and some rubber bands to kind of pull this together in order to, as much as you can, protect that digital customer experience?
Yeah, no, I've ran into that challenge a couple of times with practically all my startups, three startups that I've worked with, food tech and two healthcare startups. And I'll give you an example. Back in Zomato, when we were expanding and scaling very fast, and by the scale, I mean from a zero order in a month to 2 million orders in 1 month in within a 14 months time duration, right? So you can imagine the scale. What we ran into a challenge was essentially when we had to integrate by getting some of the restaurants like big chains, right? Their pause was acting as dinosaurs of pause, right? Something that was built 20 years, never conditioned for agile integration. There were no APIs, so on and so forth. So it was hard to lift such big organizations and have them to adjust to our fast evolving needs, because if you were to move along, it could only slow down, right? So how do you match up the pace? And I think seen the same thing in healthcare as well, wherein, let's say, the platform is not configured with the newer age fields, requirements, forms, and it's not as easy as you could just plug and play. So I think the approach to solve that is first to understand what is built in so that you don't have to reinvent. Second is to explore if there are possibilities that exist on those existing legacy platforms to adapt to our requirements. And if not, then eventually the only solution that we could come up with is having our own system in place, which is agile, which is state of the art, and also future ready. Because customer expectations are not slowing down, right? They're always evolving. And thanks to some of the big players like Amazon, who've always kept customer at the core, right? That pushes us to deliver with exceptional commitments, SLAs, and that's the need of the hour, right? So we have to adapt, we have to move fast, and we have to build everything for the customers.
I'm wondering, in your experience and what you've done in your career, how often have you run into organizations that are willing to invest in saying, we need to get off this legacy proprietary system and get something that's far more scalable, more modern, more agile? Because a lot of times, as you well know, especially older companies just don't want to make the investment, which, and it kind of boggles my mind every time I hear it, because they don't want to make the investment because it's going to be whatever it's going to be. Let's just make up it's going to be $1 million to make this change. And it's like, so we can't afford that. Well, you wait a couple of more years, that 1 million is going to become 1.2, and it's going to become 1.5. Like, the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be to get out of this. So logic would seem to dictate, let's start to make that change now and turn that wheel. But I digress. My question to you is, how often have you seen people willing to make that kind of investment and make that change? Or have you seen that?
Startups are okay to make that investment, but the moment as a startup entrepreneur, I learned that, okay, that investment is going to be $1 million, while I can build a much better product at 1/5 of the cost. Then it's always a battle of, okay, build versus buy, right? And since in any hyper growth startup, the systems have evolved aggressively, and there are a lot of moving parts. It always makes sense to build something internally that adjusts swiftly to your demand. It's like having a Lego block, right? And if you build it by yourself, if you move layer 2, then layer 3, layer 4 will be impacted, but they will auto sync in or auto adjust as well, right? Versus having any external dependencies and you don't know what's going to happen now, right? And that too, when you're spending a huge amount of money, it doesn't make sense for you not to being aware, because eventually it impacts your brand. So I think any entrepreneur would be interested to build, unless there's a quick and easy solution ready available that is quickly evolving, adjusting to your needs, and doesn't impact the user experience upfront. I think it might be worth looking into it. But apart from that, I think it's best to build inside.
And one of the things that I know people sometimes have a challenge factoring in too is, build versus buy, is that investment, that long-term investment in build, right? Because you're building something, now you've got to maintain it. And I think oftentimes leaders can get a bit short-sighted about that. They think it's kind of set it and forget it. Like, okay, we built this thing, we're done. Now you've got to invest in it, and this thing's got to kind of keep moving forward with the market, and the market's changing, and market demands are forcing you to make those investments and for this platform to be able to integrate and grow. And at times, depending on the organization its needs, that may be an argument to say, well, let's just buy something and let's let the market kind of push that particular provider to move forward and kind of evolve their platform to do that. Do you find that, especially when it comes to startups, and especially kind of fast-growing startups, which you've been a part of, that startup leaders, that they kind of understand the investment that's involved in building and are willing to make that investment because they see the future and see the potential return?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's again a call that somebody needs to take, right? What is the ROI on that investment? And it's just not the fund allocation, but it's also all about is the team and the product wired to adjust and meet our requirements, which could seamlessly work like a playbook, or to build something in-house that's easier to manage, control, and expand rapidly. Because when you have these, let's say, existing or external platforms right? They may not be able to cater to all your needs. For example, if I say in a healthcare segment, right, if I'm looking for, let's say, a call center technology, right, how important is patient data safety, right, to them? They may not have thought, because let's say if they were dealing with, an aviation industry or another industry, right, wherein it's not about patient, but it's about a user, right? So it could vary, right? So it depends on what is outrightly available off the shelf as a product offering, and does that suit your or meet your needs?
Yeah, another critical consideration as well. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's good to kind of call that out, because the particular demands and necessities of a specific industry can, as you mentioned, healthcare being a great example, can play such a critical role in those decisions because of, again, there's regulatory pressures that you're dealing with as well, in addition to just market pressures that you also have to make sure to make into account for. And a lot of times those regulatory pressures will kind of put you in a position where your choices are so much more limited. It just makes more sense to, in your case, to build versus to buy. So thank you for kind of articulating that for the sake of our listeners. Uh, Rohit, let me kind of leave you with this. Because you've built organizations, and because you've built organizations, teams, stacks to be able to scale, and ultimately to scale effectively, has been the success that you've had over the course of your career. What do you see as those kind of key components that you would kind of give to advice to other marketing leaders as they try to scale their organizations in this kind of modern digital age? What are those kind of tidbits of advice that you can share that you think will really help them to keep their focus moving forward?
I think two or three things that has worked well in my experience, and I've also learned, right? One is it's hard to scale, but the only way that you could scale is one, learning from the user behavior, call it a voice of customer or customer insights, leveraging the data-driven approach to make decisions and help you prioritize what's urgent, what's important, what's impacting, what's leading to the top line, how does it impact, so on and so forth, understanding the ramifications, and then making quick decisions. I think what I've also learned in my experience, I've observed, sometimes we know a lot of things, but just that we shy away making those decisions. And what I've seen working well with hyperscale startups when I was leading some of the teams there is, it's okay to fail fast. It's okay to make a bad decision, but it's not okay to not learn or move fast. Sit on making a decision. So as an organization DNA, one needs to have uh, an agile approach plugged in. That should be the DNA, and be ready to test. Having A/B testing, having NPS to measure what's working for the customers. That has to be embedded as a DNA, right? There is no way, and this is the value that I've lived in my e-commerce stint, right? We got to rush. If we rush without these, either having customer insights or testing or sitting on decisions, it could just lead to bleeding margins. So I think building all of that is important. And then comes a scale that is sustainable, because eventually, we have responsibility towards customers of building something which is future-proof, user-friendly, and also does not compromise on the quality of care.
Rohit, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights, for your time, for sharing your experience with our audience. We really appreciated having you on today, and so happy that you were able to buy out the time to be on the podcast today.
No, thank you, Shamir. It was a pleasure talking.